cultivating an eternal versus a temporal or a temporary perspective. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but it's not. It just kind of sounds that way a little bit. We don't use the word paradigm a whole lot. I don't think I have a question like this in here. Just for a basic definition, as simple as we can. What does that word paradigm? What does that mean? Very basically. Simply means a way of thinking. Yeah, that's it. That's it, and that's all. So your paradigm is the way that you think. Now, you've heard that term before, a paradigm shift. So what is that? It's a change in the way you're thinking. I used to think like this. I had a paradigm shift. I had a shift in my thinking. And that happens to us all the time. So what is paradigm spirituality? Well, what paradigm spirituality is most people think on a temporary basis. They believe in what they see. We believe in what's in front of us. People have a way of prioritizing their life based on what they see and what they believe. And the Bible challenges us to change our paradigm from our way of thinking to God's way of thinking. And the more we study and the more we learn, the more we submit to God's word, the more we live in obedience to it, the more the way we think about doing things shifts to the way God thinks about doing things. So that's really just kind of a basic way to talk about this. But it's going to come clear as we go through it as well. Our first kind of heading section we're going to look at tonight is shifting paradigms. Now the Bible is God has always been about the business of shifting the minds of his people, changing the minds of his people, and it's consistent throughout the Word of God. Look at several scriptures here to emphasize this. Psalm 90, verse 12. David said, so teach us to number... No, not David, I'm sorry. Moses wrote this psalm. So teach us to number our days so that we may present to you a heart of wisdom. Moses is saying to God, God, teach me to think differently. Teach me how to number my days. Why? Why do that? So that we may present to you a heart of wisdom. So that's an interesting statement that Moses makes there, an interesting request. Let's just break it down and simplify it a little bit. What does it mean to number our days? To keep track of them, yeah. And how would we do that? Why? Moses is asking God to help him to learn how to do this. So he's probably not talking about the way we would think to do it. He says, God, I want to think about days, the days of my life, our days, the days of these people. Teach us to number our days the way that you do. We already have a way that we do it. Teach us to do it like you. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think talking there leads me to think that there may not be a tomorrow, so I need to live my life thinking in terms that there may not be a tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, and Dave was saying, a big part of this has to do with changing the way I think, so where I don't have the mindset of I'm promised tomorrow. Are any of us promised tomorrow? No, but and we know that, but we know that on a we know that because we know we're supposed to know that, right? Who has plans to do something tomorrow? Right. So we're not like all doom and gloom either. We're not all saying, oh, this is it. I'm going to make sure I hug everybody in the room tonight before I leave because I may never see you again. But there's the truth in that too. I may never see you again. Right? If I don't, I just want you to know that I love you. I appreciate that, Dave. So Moses wants the Lord to teach him how to number his days, but then he adds something onto that. So teach us to number our days, that we may present to you a heart of wisdom. So, what is the link between numbering our days and being wise? Moses, teach me to do this, Lord, so that I can present before you myself a person that is wise. How's it wise? Yeah. That's another way to say what Moses is saying, isn't it? Lord, teach me how to not, a big part of it, teach me how to not waste my days. I don't know how much I've got, but with what I've got left, teach me what to do. Teach me how to use my time. So it's a different way of thinking, but it's also a different way of doing. Anyone else have anything extra that goes with that? I mean, anything else you were thinking along the link between numbering our days and being wise? Yeah. Theoretically, theoretically, now we all know there are exceptions to this, but theoretically, age and wisdom are supposed to go hand in hand. Now we all know people that's not true of, but for the most part, as a kind of a what am I trying to say? It's not a it's a I don't know. I'm losing my mind. I was going to say if it's something that's not a guarantee, but it's kind of a say again. A proverb. Yeah, that's basically, it's what the proverbs are. Like, it's like the proverb, and that's exactly what I was thinking of, because it's like the proverb that says, raise your children up in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. That's not a guarantee. It's the way that things should be if everything were perfect. That's what that is. This is, that's the same way too. If everything were perfect, as you got older, you would get wiser. That's the way it's supposed to be, not the way it always is. A big part of knowing how to be wise as we get older is knowing how to number our days, knowing how to use our time effectively. And we use our time the way that God would have us to. Wisdom's going to grow out of that. Psalm 39, 4 through 7. I'm going to go through several of them with you right quick. Other examples of this. David did say this one. Moses said the first one. Then David said something very similar. Lord, make me to know my end and what is the extent of my days. Let me know how transient I am. That word transient, it's a word in Hebrew that's hard to, what we have there is a word in Hebrew that's hard to translate. The best translation for that is frail. That Hebrew word is most often translated as frail. And if we replace the word transient, which is kind of tricky, with the word frail, it makes sense. Let me know how frail I am. Behold, you have made my days as handbreadths, and my lifetime as nothing in your sight. Surely every man at his best is a mere breath, Selah. Surely every man walks about as a phantom. Surely they make an uproar for nothing. He amasses riches and does not know who will gather them. And now, Lord, for what do I wait? My hope is in you. I remember, and it is, I remember, and so many of these thoughts come to a person, I think, when they feel like this is the end for me. And when I remember sitting with my grandpa when my grandpa was in the last days of his life. And he was so concerned about how's everything going to function when I'm not around? Like, what's going to happen? And finally, he'd bring something up. And he'd say, it doesn't matter. He'd think about something. I was like, don't worry, it's all going to be all right. Like, you're not going to know about it anyway. So take peace in that. Everything's going to be all right. Well, have we made sure this? Yes, we've got that lined out. Well, you know where this paperwork is? Yes, I know where all that paperwork is. Okay. So, he was just squaring everything away. But, I saw him there at the end of his life, and he was basically at the end of his life, even though he lived a long life, he still found himself laying there scrambling for time and looking back and saying, and he would tell me things like, Wes, before you know it, you're going to be old like me. He's like, I don't remember getting old. I don't remember this happening. And one day it was just here. So when he got older, he used to tell me things like that. David expresses the same thing that Moses did. He wants to know, he wants to understand time better. He wants to think the way God thinks. And there's there's hope in that, and there's a little despair in that. That fear of the fear of this life ending, which is just a natural fear. Isaiah 40, verses 6b, the second half of verse 6 through verse 8. Isaiah wrote, all flesh is grass, and all its loveliness is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades, when the breath of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. So he says something about how temporary things are. We know how temporary grass is, and flowers come up and they're real pretty, and then as soon as they're there, it seems like they're gone, right? And he says that's what our lives are like. Our lives are like that. They're there, you're pretty for a little while, and then it's over. Then you are the flower, you begin to wilt, and then you're dead. And that's kind of a bleak picture. But then he throws something in with that, which is interesting. But the word of our God stands forever. So what does one thing have to do with the other? He's saying people and all the philosophies that have come and gone throughout all generations, they come and go. But God and his word remain. It's just a mind-boggling thing to think about generations that were before us. And think about the most famous people that ever were are still just a little blip on the radar of time. And I think about people like, Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan, or people that seemed so much larger than life in their time, and people all over the world knew who they were. Or even people that think about people who were who was someone who would be like the biggest celebrity 50 years ago. There's whole generations of people that don't even know who can't even name someone who was a celebrity 50 years ago. Not even one. Not to mention the most famous one. Yeah, I remember. You realize these things. It's like a little miniature, mind-blowing thing when one of your kids says something to you, like they hear someone. Oh no, we were in a cafe. I remember that's what it was, and there was in the middle of the cafe is a little rock and roll cafe in Broken Arrow, back breakfast place. In the corner, there's a statue of Elvis, and the kids were like, "Who is that?" And I said, "That's Elvis." And they were like, "Was he a singer?" It's like, yeah, he was a singer. But that's it. To my kids, it's like, who was Elvis? Nobody. 100 years from now, people may not even know who he was, right? But the word of God remains, and it's steadfast. I love preaching out of these passages out of the Old Testament, because they're timeless. It's not. I don't feel like I'm reading something that was. Sometimes I do. Sometimes because of the analogies or something. Sometimes I feel like it's ancient. But most of the time, I don't. Most of the time, it just speaks to me just like anything else good in the Bible. Psalm 103, 15 through 18. As for man, his days are like grass. Now, here's David writing again. And Isaiah probably, may have even been thinking of this psalm of David when he wrote what he wrote. Maybe, maybe not. Very similar, though. As for man, his days are like grass. As a flower of the field, so he flourishes. When the wind has passed over it, it is no more, and its place acknowledges it no longer. But the loving kindness of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting on those who fear him, and his righteousness to children's children, to those who keep his covenant and remember his precepts to do them. So here we have this brevity of life statement. Life is short. You know, we're here today, we're gone tomorrow. But then there's a juxtaposition in there. But the loving kindness of the Lord is from everlasting. So David is saying, life is short, but that's okay, because God is good. Is God good to all? No, he's not. You think the people that he pours his wrath out on someday will think that he's being good to them? No. Who's he good to? Look at verse 18. To those who keep his covenant and remember his precepts to do them. It's the way it's always been, the way it still is. James 4, jump to the New Testament right quick, verses 13 through 16. We'll skip all of Solomon, all the things he says about, all the depressing things he says about the end of time, end of life. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So it's interesting statements made there, because on the surface, if you just look at it on the surface, you know, people in this room have made statements like this before. You know, I'm going to move to this city. I plan on living there. I plan on doing business there. I plan on working there, making a profit. Nothing wrong with any of those things. There's nothing wrong with moving. There's nothing wrong with working. There's nothing wrong with making a profit. Those things are not sinful. So, what can make our planning evil? Sometimes it's not in what you see, it's in the absence. What's not here? God. That's right. That's right. This is a picture of a person who makes their plans. And where's God? Where's God in those plans? It's not that and lots of people do that. And there's nothing. I mean, the plans that people make are generally amoral. I mean, they're neither good nor evil. They just are what they are, just plans. But to not include God in your planning, it's such an interesting. James was a hellfire and brimstone preacher, if there ever was one, and his teaching is the same. The book of James, he's very adamant on things that he says. Like what he says there, you boast in your arrogance for saying that. All such boasting is evil. And it is evil to think in such a way where you plan your life and you don't include God in the planning. That's evil. That's interesting. Interesting thought. Our next kind of subheading is reality and hope. Reality and hope, things we'll look at. There's three competing worldviews. Now, I kind of made these in my own style. There's more technical words for this, but the first worldview is this. This is it. This is all there is. What you see in this world, we're in the world, we're in our solar system, we're floating through space, and this is it. What you see is what you get. So, you know, I've shared with you that I used to have a coworker who claimed to be an atheist. This would be an atheistic view. This is it. And he would say to me, he said, Wes, you deprive yourself. You don't do everything that you want to do. And I said, well, no, I don't do everything that I want to do, because a lot of the things that come into my mind to do are things that God says not to do. And he said, not me, though. He said, I don't believe in God, so I do whatever I want to do. He said, you see, when you don't believe in God, you can live your life to the fullest. You can't live your life to the fullest because you believe in God. And I'm going to enjoy my life to the fullest now, and you're just gonna live your life now hoping that there's something better someday. I said, that's right. I don't even disagree with that. I said, but I got to tell you, man, I'm sold out on my belief. And I said, but I would challenge you a step further than that. Now, he would disagree with me on this, but I would say I am supremely more happy than you are. And I'm happy not because I do everything that I want to do, and I'm not sad because I don't get to do certain things that God tells me not to do. But when you live your life the way God tells you to live your life, you're going to be happier than you could ever imagine by doing so. The more you consent to live the way that he wants to. Well, he said, well, why don't more people feel that way? Why don't more people have that experience? Because they don't do it. That's it. I mean, it takes, and I don't do it fully. It takes courage to live by faith. It takes courage to believe and to live out, to feel something in your heart, and the Bible say something contrary, and to go with what the Bible says over what you feel. That's difficult to do. But if you will do it, you will be blessed. But God's not going to bless you to get you to do it. He's going to make you do it. He's going to have you do it so the blessing will come. So there's the first competing worldview. This is it. The next one, and this is a big worldview, there is a spiritual reality, but it's not personal. You say, what is this? What is this talking about? Every religion other than Christianity. Every single religion other than Christianity. If I'm wrong, show me I'm wrong someday. But I haven't studied it in the greatest depth, but I did take a course in college on world religions, and I read about every single major religion in the world in a textbook, and Christianity was very unique in that it was the only one that offered any form of hope, true hope. Basically, every other religion has some form of, they have a hope, but it's every single one of their hopes is based on, if I can do enough good in this life, then maybe there'll be a payoff for me someday in eternity. Maybe. No guarantees. The third is spiritual reality that is personal. And we can find this in two ways. You can find this in Judaism, which denies Christ, but still believes in the same God that we believe in. And of course in Christianity, where our hope is not based upon our performance, and our eternal salvation has nothing to do with how good I am and how much good I do. But we're the only one that's like that. And other religions look at that and say, how on earth could you ever believe that? How could you ever believe that? And why do people believe that's wrong? Even certain people in Christianity who have a works-based system of theology, because what's actually true of grace is too good to be true. But the wonderful thing about grace being too good to be true, though, is that it actually is true. We're saved because of Jesus and what he did, not because of what I do. So there's our three competing worldviews. Okay, so why am I talking? I'm getting there. I'm building to something. Okay, so why am I talking about this? There's two competing paradigms, two competing ways of thinking: temporary and eternal. There's not an in-between one. There's not a third one. Usually when there's only two of something, I learned a long time ago, usually when someone presents there's only two of something, that's typically called a false dichotomy. I mean, it's not true, because if you look hard enough, you find a third or fourth or fifth or whatever. But no, people live in either temporary or eternal ways of thinking. The Christian, though, gets stuck between the temporary and the eternal. In what ways do we get caught up in the temporary? I'm not talking about other people. I'm talking about us. Our possessions. Yeah, I mean, has anyone in this room ever not had the thought, if I had this, whatever this is, could be anything, could be something big, could be something small. Man, if I had this, I would be happy. And it's such an easy thing to creep in, isn't it? And it's such an easy thing to work towards, or to, okay, so that thought comes to my mind. Oh, if I had this thing, I will be, it doesn't matter what it is. If I had this thing, I would be happy. So now what am I going to do with my time? If I really believe that, I'm going to try to get that thing. And when I'm working to try to get that thing, whatever that means, working towards trying to get that thing, what is my focus on? That thing. I mean, James, I don't have this scripture up here, but James says, when you think like that, that's idolatry. And it is, because we just get, okay, God, you're my God, but ooh, I really want this other thing over here. It's not my God. I know it's not my God. You're still my God. But just for a while, just until I'm able to get it, I'm going to put all my focus and all my attention on getting that thing. Because if I have that, Lord, things will be good. Things will be real good. There's other ways we get caught up in the temporary. We talked about time tonight, the way we plan our time, the way we think about what will I do with my time. And it may not even, some of us may not even be that much of a conscious thought. I don't think that much about it. I just, I kind of, and this is probably poor planning on my behalf, but I kind of live, I'm getting better at living more of like a week at a time than a day at a time. But I don't look too far into the future. But man, if you pulled up on my calendar on my phone, you would see, because my wife and I have a shared calendar, like there is a little dot on every single day going out probably through February of next year where there's something planned. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Kendall's just a thinker and a planner, and I don't think that far ahead, or try to plan that far ahead. But it's easy when I look at a year, and I always try to do a little bit of planning when a new year rolls around. It's easy to get caught up in temporary things. Have you ever looked at your year and the first thought you had was, this is a bad tendency of mine, where's my vacation going to fit in there? Where am I going to squeeze it in? Because I love vacation, right? I mean, it's not nothing wrong with going on a vacation. Probably shouldn't be my very first thought. Probably shouldn't be my the top of the list. It's easy to get caught up in. It's easy to fill your life with so much time-consuming stuff that God isn't in it. And we're not excluding God on purpose. We're not setting out to exclude God or for God not to be a part of our lives. But then, I'm up here on Sunday morning and I'm reading announcements. Hey, we've got some things planned. The church has some things planned. Church, we're going to do this. And you look at your calendar. Oh, no way I can do that. Calendar's full. Oh, we're going to do this. Oh, can't fit that in either. We're going to do this. Oh, can't fit that in either. And it's just, I'm not picking on anybody. It's just the world that we live in. We fill up every bit of our time, and oftentimes without a conscious thought of, well, if I commit to doing all these things, where does that leave God? In what way do we prepare for the eternal? See, that's the unique thing about a Christian is we think in both, I think we truly do, we think in both realms. We attend church, yeah. Yeah, and part of our attendance of church, coming to worship God, we worship God hopefully because we believe we're going to see Him someday. Yeah, I don't think, if someone told me they lived every day like it was going to be their last, I don't think I would call them a liar, but I'd definitely be thinking it. I did have a guy one time, and y'all will appreciate this, I did have a guy one time tell me that when the end of the world was going to be. You ever had someone tell you that? I know when the end of the world is. My preacher told me when the end of the world is. It's coming. And I told that guy, I said, you don't believe that. And he said, yeah, I do. I said, you believe that the end of the world is in less than a month? Yeah. And it's all going to be over? Yeah. I said, then why are you working in a gas station? Well, seriously. I mean, wouldn't you go do something with this is what you want to do with the last time you have left? Is work behind the counter of a gas station? I'm not saying, there's nothing wrong with working behind the counter of a gas station. But if that's what I do, and I know that the world's going to end in a month, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm going to do something else for a month, right? How else do we prepare for the eternal? Yeah. It's such a strange thing to me. It's such a strange thing to me. The different ways that people think about salvation. I've known so many people that don't want anything to do with God or Jesus in this life, but they want to be in heaven. Why? If you don't want to spend time with Jesus now, what makes you think you're going to want to spend time with Him then? I mean, you're not going to fool Him. You're not going to sneak in. If you don't like worshiping God, then I got real bad news for you. That's what eternity has waiting for you. Worshiping of God. Say, yeah, but it'll be better there. Yeah, but it'll still be worshiping God. Yeah, I think a lot of that, what Wade said is, And we do it in a lot of different ways. We just don't think of it in this way. You know, in preparing for eternity, you know, I think it when I think about I mean, I'm a bad example because I'm a preacher. It's like, well, yeah, you like to study every day and all that. But you know what? I don't necessarily study every day because it's like I wake up like, yeah, I can't wait to study the Bible. It's like I've got a job to do. You know, I've got lessons to prepare for. So I think that doesn't count as much. You know what I'm saying? But before, so let me go back and use as an example of the way I thought when I worked in the corporate world, in insurance. You know, it's like I would try to prioritize my life in such a way that I spent intimate time with the Lord every single day, because I wanted the Lord to know that I appreciated Him, and that I believed in Him, that He meant something that He was something very special to me, and I did that in anticipation of seeing Him someday. What a strange thing, hearing about someone your whole life, you know, hearing about someone your whole life, yet you've never met them, but you will. But how much you believe that you will, or whether you actually believe that you will or not, will affect what you do with your time here. If everyone in the church believed that tomorrow was the end of time, I pick on everyone who's not here tonight, how many people do you think would be at church tonight? It would be shameful how many people would be at church. And I would have to tell those people, the Lord knows that you only came because, you know, because you said, oh no, I think in the little bit of time I have left, I should try to make God more of a priority than what I have. Luke 12:16-21, Jesus told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man was very productive. And he began reasoning to himself, saying, what shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops? Then he said, this is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many good things laid up for many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you. And now who will own what you have prepared? So is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Now this has to do specifically with money and, you know, what you do with your possessions, but he could have used a different example if he was talking about something else. But how would a man eternally minded have thought versus the man in the parable? Yeah, he would have thought, I've got all this. Look at how my business has gone through the roof. I'm more successful than I ever imagined. Instead of saying, I know what I'll do. I'll build bigger barns. What would an eternally minded person have said? Or possibly. What say, Jane? Yeah, I mean, they don't necessarily have to give it all away, right? Yeah. I mean, because, yeah, say again, Louise? Yeah. I mean, the guy's already successful. Now he's just more successful. But it doesn't come into his mind, how can I honor God? You know, there was a living illustration of this in the man Zacchaeus. Super rich by sordid gain. This guy wasn't even rich by sordid gain. He just got successful doing what he was doing. Zacchaeus got rich off of other people's misery. But when he came into relationship with Jesus, and the way that he thought shifted, when he had that paradigm shift, What did he say about his money? What did Zacchaeus do? Mm-hmm. He paid back what he shouldn't have taken in the first place. And then what? Well, basically, he paid back more. Um, he paid back everyone that he cheated, and then he gave him more above what he cheated him. And then and he stopped doing it. Yeah. Um, so you see how in an encounter with Jesus, the way that he thought totally shifted. Now let me show you one other thing. Now the verse that I didn't include when I read this to you was the verse that preceded this, one verse before this, back up to verse 15, and look what it says. Then Jesus said to them, "Beware and be on your guard against every form of greed, for not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions." And then the scripture says, and then he told them a parable. So this sets up the parable, but I left it off on purpose so I could ask this question at the end. So if Jesus says, not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions, then what does my life consist of? The only thing that's going to count is what you do for Christ. Go ahead. Absolutely. Yeah. Y- Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jesus was the greatest example of teaching us that you don't have to have a lot to be generous. To be generous, you use what you have. You know, God never will call you to use what you don't have, but He does call you to use what you do have. Yes. Yes. You know, Jesus teaches us too that when I ask the question, "What does my life consist of?" You know, Jesus teaches that He is the way, the truth, and the life. If if I don't have Jesus, then it doesn't matter what else I have. It doesn't matter because First Peter teaches us that when the Lord returns, the earth and all the elements are going to be burned up, and even your most precious heirlooms. Yeah. Yes. Right. Right. Um, all right. So hey, good class tonight. We will have an invitation song. If anyone has need to respond to the invitation tonight, that's always available to do so. If it's convenient for you, let's stand together. And actually, before we sing the song, Do you want to make your announcement before Rex or afterward? Afterward. Okay. So um, let's sing number 31. If anyone has a need to respond, go ahead and do that. But don't run out after the song's over because there's an announcement as well from Rex. So just hang in with us. Number 31.